Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our first Parent University of the 21-22 school year. I'm Natalie Treadgold. I am a member of our family engagement team here at DCPS, and just want to thank you so much for joining us, whether you are watching this live or watching a recording later. We really appreciate the partnership of all of our families as we work to move into a smooth start of our school year. So we're going to be joined by DCPS leadership and some health experts in a moment. I'm going to quickly go over some housekeeping items, and then I will turn it over to our panel for the bulk of tonight's content. So if this is the first time you're joining us, we want to share that we're using Microsoft Teams Live for this event. There are subtitles available. So if you need subtitles, you want to click the gear icon in the bottom right hand of your screen, select subtitles captions, and then the language that you prefer. We also have a simultaneous interpretation happening on Zoom, and the link to join that in Spanish is in the chat. The last piece from me is just a reminder about our Q&A feature. So we know we're going to get a ton of great questions from folks joining, so please use that Q&A box to add your questions. Also feel free to give a thumbs up to the questions that your other people ask that you're curious about. We have a team of folks on the back end here who are responding to as many questions as possible. So we are going to do our best to get to as many as we can. For those that we don't get to tonight, we'll be updating our frequently asked questions and getting information out to folks as soon as we have final information as much as possible. With all of that said, thank you again for joining us. We're really looking forward to tonight's presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Chancellor, Chancellor Lewis Ferebee. Chancellor, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Natalie. We have a great team assembled tonight and a great evening planned for you with critical updates on the opening of schools. We're thinking about tracking to the first day of school on August 30th. We can't wait to get our students back in the building. We're looking forward to having full-time in-person learning for our students. We know that there's a lot you are thinking about, lots to expect this school year, especially around health and safety, teaching and learning, and more. So as a result, we have a panel today that consists of experts from DCPS and then also a guest expert to talk a little bit more about these areas of teaching and learning, health and safety, and more. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you our panel. First, we have Shanita Burney, who leads our engagement and partnership work. She will help moderate the night and also assist with our Q&A. We have Patrick Davis, who is the DCPS Chief Operations Officer, Dr. Bren Elliot, who manages the school improvement and support work, including our health and safety work, and Corie Colgan, who leads teaching and learning for the district. As our expert guest, we also have Dr. Lee Beers. Dr. Lee Beers is also a proud DCPS parent. She is representing as the president of the American Academy of Pediatrics. So she has lots of expertise around health and safety and as a practitioner in the healthcare field. So again, thank you to the team for joining us tonight as panelists. And one of the first panelists you get an opportunity to hear from is Chief Davis. Well, before we go to Chief Davis, I want to again just reiterate what we are expecting and the excitement we have to open our doors on August 30th. We know it's right around the corner and many families are thinking and preparing and just wanting to know that we are ready. And we want to ensure you of that tonight and give you some details as what to expect for the school year. We can't wait to see our families. We can't wait to see our students and staff and our partners back in our building. And can't believe it, less than 3 weeks, we'll be back in school. We'll be reopening, as I said earlier, for 5 days a week, full time. We will have a virtual option for those that are medically fragile and who have not been able to report to school due to medical reasons and not able to join us. and those students need to complete a medical exemption, and that form has been communicated, and we'll talk a little bit more about that tonight. We also are wrapping up all of our summer programming. We had amazing support from our recovery community core teams who plan exciting opportunities for our students. Many of our students are in summer bridge as we speak this week, getting a leg up into the school year. And so we want to shout out our community core teams for their assistance. All of our schools have had the highest degree of safety standards, which represent our work from last school year, the spring, and the work that we've done over the summer. So I can assure you we are ready. DCPS is committed to creating a supportive environment for academics, but also socially and emotionally as well. When we think about welcoming our students back into school, all of our schools are planning activities for the first few days of schools for students to get to know their peers and also for students to reconnect with adults in the building. And prior to that, we'll have a number of professional development sessions for staff and staff to reconnect as well. Our schools will continue to implement a layered approach for health and safety to ensure that we're able to offer in-person learning. And that includes required face coverings, that includes the work that we've done with our HVAC systems, ensuring that we have water available in a safe way through our water stations, our isolation room. There's a lot of work that DCPS has done and a lot we've learned from and a lot we will continue to build upon as we think about this school year. So with that, that's a great segue into our operations team work around health and safety. So it's my pleasure at this time to turn it over to Chief Davis. He will share a little bit more about what we're doing as relates to our operations work. I do want to call out that we have had HVAC enhancements that have been completed by experts in the field to ensure that we have well ventilated spaces. As I mentioned earlier, we will have required face masks for both staff, students, and visitors. We also have enhanced cleaning protocols. We will have social distancing to the extent possible. Most of our classrooms will allow students to be at least 3 feet apart. And then we will also have verbal health screenings as students enter the building daily. And as announced today, we will have a vaccine requirement for all staff. Today, Mayor Bowser, myself, in partnership with city leaders, announced a vaccine requirement for all government employees, including DCPS employees, that all school staff be vaccinated by September the 19th to continue their work in the district or to provide a negative test on a weekly basis. And so at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Davis, who will share a little bit more on details around health and safety measures for the 21-22 school year.
Great, thanks a lot, Chancellor, and good evening to everyone, and thank you for joining. I hope you have all had a nice break this summer and found some time to, relax and get away and spend time with your family. But we're obviously focused on getting back to school, and we're happy to share some updates with you all today. The first thing I just want to norm on, actually the Chancellor touched on it, is we're talking about reopening, but the reality is we've actually haven't closed our buildings since the spring. All of our buildings have been in operation since the spring. All of our schools have had summer programming. So while we're framing this as reopening, the reality is our buildings have been functioning and keeping our kids safe for the past number of months. But we remain committed to that. We're obviously excited to have all of our students come back in the fall, at the end of August. But we remain committed to making sure that all of our student staff and you all and visitors remain safe if they're in our schools. So I'll touch on a few of the key highlights here, and obviously the team is in the background answering questions if you have them, but we'll try to go through as much as we can here. The Chancellor touched on most of these, but I'll dig a little bit deeper in each of these topics. First, our custodial crews have done just an amazing job over the past 18 months or throughout the entire public health emergency to keep all of our buildings clean and safe. So we will be continuing doing our enhanced cleaning approach. So that means focused cleaning across the entire building, but focusing on high touch areas. So ensuring that doorknobs and buttons and handlebars and push bars are all cleaned as frequently as possible, using cleaning supplies that are outlined by the CDC and the EPA for school use. We will continue that procedure throughout this upcoming school year, and really want to thank our custodial crews who have just done an amazing job throughout the past number of months to keep all of our buildings clean and ready. The next thing, the Chancellor hinted at this and touched on this, but we will maintain our HVAC enhancements. We've done a lot of investment and work on our HVAC systems to improve both ventilation and filtration. We hired last year a third-party engineer who sits in the ASHRAE task force to design a program that improves air quality and ventilation in every single one of our buildings. So there's 117 different buildings that got a unique treatment based on their conditions, but the end result was that we're improving air quality and reducing the risk of airborne transmission through these efforts. So all of our central HVAC systems have MERV 13 filters, and all of our classrooms, you'll see individual portable HEPA filters in the room. Additionally, we've installed air quality monitors across the building, focusing on every HVAC zone in the building. So each building will have at least 10 air quality sensors installed. And what those are doing is those are not tracking to measure if there's COVID in the air. There's actually no airborne test, but what we're doing is measuring for key metrics and particulate matter and CO2 and VOC, humidity and temperature, on a continuous basis across the building. And what those metrics are doing are really measuring, are we creating an environment that is safe and creates the best air possible? Are we limiting and reducing the possibility of airborne transmission? So we are tracking that. All of that data is going to a third-party engineer who is monitoring all of that data, and we're making adjustments as needed. But I'm happy to share that all of our air quality has actually been really, really positive over the past year or so. In fact, we've gotten lots of national recognition for our HVAC program, and we're really proud of the work that we've done there. Next, as you'll see when you come back to the buildings, you'll see our classrooms are set up differently. We're socially distanced, and we're going to be separating this as classrooms, but really any space. We're going to be separating chairs and tables as far away as possible. And that exact distance is going to vary depending on the constraints of that room and how many kids are in the room. But in alignment with CDC, we will be separating as far as we possibly can, again, given the constraints of that room. So you'll see different setup and encouragement that students are separated as far as possible. The Chancellor touched on this, and we've touched on this over the past year or so, all of our traditional water fountains have been turned off. As you can imagine, those are not the cleanest space in the world when you have a 6-year-old going to a water fountain. So we have procured water coolers and bottles, so students will have access to safe and fresh water throughout the day without relying on the traditional water fountains. You will see signage posted across the entire building, that's both at the entries and corridors and classrooms, encouraging distancing, highlighting the cleaning that's going on. All of the normal health and safety measures that we've talked about, mask wearing, they're just visual reminders to make sure we're keeping on top of all of the necessary guidance and messaging to both students and staff. And next, we continue to prioritize plumbing work orders with our partners at the Department of General Services. As part of our re-entry into schools and getting all of our kids back, some of this will be a re-norming in terms of how our days are set up and making sure that our students have scheduled and regular access to hand washing and hygiene supplies. We want to make sure that we're limiting the transmission of the virus through any ingestion and any virus on your hands. So in alignment with CDC, we'll be encouraging hand washing as much as possible. But in order to do that, we need to make sure our sinks are working properly. So we will continue to prioritize all of our plumbing systems throughout the building to make sure there are adequate resources for students and staff to wash their hands. Next slide. So all of these things you'll get to see firsthand when you actually come into our buildings. And one of the things we've recognized over the past 18 months, and we thank you for this, but it's been a challenge for you all to understand what school looks like because most of you have actually not been in our buildings. We had very strict protocols last year to really limit visitors as we were learning more about the virus. But we're happy to share that we're opening all of our doors. We're encouraging schools to set up tours and open houses. As you can see here at Eastern and Roosevelt and Dunbar, have already started to do this, and many of our schools have started to do this. And we encourage you to come and see what the schools look like. We're really proud of the work that our schools have done. They've done a tremendous job of, taking the operational guidance that we share and taking and updating their individual schools to make sure they're safe, and maybe more importantly, welcoming. It's important that we're creating both safe environments, but we don't want to create these overly sterile environments where kids feel like they're walking through this institutional environment. This needs to feel like school, and our schools have just done a tremendous job of, keeping that softness in our buildings, while we're implementing the social distancing and mask wearing and all these new things, but it still feels like school. And you'll see that when you walk into our buildings. And we really encourage you to go to your individual schools, reach out to the school leader to understand when they're going to have open houses. We're encouraging all of our schools to do it, and we encourage you to get out there and see it yourself. It's one thing to hear us talk through slides, but getting out there and seeing yourself will be important as you're coming back to school in a few weeks. Next slide. Just some quick pictures, and then I will move on to some academic. I'll have the team move on to academic stuff. I just want to highlight again how amazing our custodial crews have been throughout the pandemic. They continue to do really amazing work. We're giving them dedicated training this summer to support the new protocols and continued following of the protocols. But just a picture and recognition of their hard work. Just a few pictures of the classrooms. It's obviously very different, being socially distant and separated. But as you can see, the classrooms still feel like classrooms, and kids will be in a learning environment. And I think that's really important to see, and you'll be able to see that. And then meals. We will continue to have great nutritious meals for all of our students, whether they're learning in person or if they've applied for and received verification to do at-home learning, virtual learning. We will continue our meal service for students that are doing virtual learning. And students will be eating in the buildings with hot, nutritious meals that meet all of our nutritional requirements. And we're going to make sure this is done in a way where students are separated and structures are in place to make sure that we have proper protocols in place to keep eating an orderly function throughout the day. So with that said, I'm going to turn to my partner, Corie, to walk through some of the academic features that we're going to talk about.
Great. Thank you very much, Patrick, and good evening, everyone. I'm very excited to talk about some of the teaching and learning aspects for this coming year. And the headline, as the Chancellor shared at the beginning of the evening tonight, is that we will have 5 full days of in-person instruction. And we will focus this year on meeting students where they are, really being thoughtful about prioritizing the key content and skills that our students need to be successful, and accelerate learning. And we will accelerate our learning, that doesn't mean just rushing through everything, but by going deeper, not necessarily faster. So I'm going to talk a little more about what that looks like. We have been working within our teams at central office and with all of our school teams to think about how we can accelerate learning for students. We know that this past year has been challenging in many ways, and many of you probably have questions about how much your students have learned. Have they fallen behind in any ways? And we also know that students have experienced virtual learning or in different ways, and some have come back for part of this past year in person, and some have remained virtual all year. So we need to set up a plan that is responsive to that. And so we are working with all of our school teams to ensure that they have all of the guidance and resources they need to ensure that our students are accelerating and learning what it is that they need to learn to be successful. So we have 5 guiding principles that are informing our work in this area. To begin with, we know that we need to start by creating learning environments that are based on welcoming students back into the school community. It's going to be adjustment for many students who have been out of in-person school for a long time. So we'll be focusing alongside our academics and learning, we will be focusing at the beginning of the year on student wellness, on building relationships, rebuilding school communities, and igniting the joy for learning that our students have. And so we start with holistic environments, And then we want to ensure that all of our students have access to grade level content. So if we're thinking about this past year, and what we want to ensure is that our students are focusing on what it is they need to be successful in the grade level content for the year that they are entering. So we are not going to go back and reteach all of the previous year, but we also need to be realistic that students may have some gaps here and there. And so the approach that we'll take is an approach known as acceleration, where students will focus on prioritized grade level content. They will go deep in that content, and as needed, we will reteach or reinforce skills from the previous year's content, prerequisite content that they may need to be successful with this year's grade level content. In addition to that approach, we are doubling down on some of the best practices that we know help accelerate learning for all students. So this is this idea of accelerators for learning for all. So when we concentrate on small group instruction within the classroom, differentiating our instruction for what students need, providing access for diverse learners, so providing those supports and access points for students with disabilities and English learners. These pedagogical practices or teaching practices that our teachers use in the classroom can support all students in learning the material better. And so we are helping our schools to double down on those practices, and you may see your students or hear about your students being engaged in more small group learning and more targeted learning based on where they are. We do know that in addition to all of those components, we will have students who really need some extended learning time and will really benefit from more individualized instruction through the use of tutoring. So one of our key principles for this year is to provide opportunities for extended learning and tutoring for a subset of students who show that they need that. And we will talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. In order to be successful in all of these areas, it's really critical that we pay close attention to comprehensive data on how our students are doing. So we will be looking at day-to-day data from the classroom, thinking about, as well as our typical beginning, middle, and end of year assessments, and throughout the year formative assessments that help us pinpoint where students are being successful and where they need additional support, or what prerequisite skills they do or do not have, and so that we can plan our instruction accordingly. So I mentioned the principle of extending learning time for some students. The Chancellor mentioned earlier on about our summer acceleration academies that school teams worked with their recovery community core, so their team of community members and parents and staff members to develop acceleration opportunities for students. We have found that this has been a great success. There's been so much excitement generated in the schools and with the students that are participating in these, and we're continuing this concept through the school year. So we will be, our schools will be launching school year acceleration academies, and this is allowing schools to use outside of the school day time to provide additional supports for some students. We anticipate, depending on the school, this would range between 10% to 35% of the students. We will look both at students' academic data as well as their social emotional needs that they may have to consider who would be best served in the acceleration academies. And that may not be static throughout the year. As things change and students develop or progress, they may move in or out of the acceleration academies. This will primarily look like small group instruction and will support both academics and social emotional development. They may take place before school, after school. They may be embedded into existing after school programming. Many of our schools may leverage Saturdays as an opportunity to provide extended learning time, and some schools may even provide some vacation academy opportunities for students. We will closely monitor how these academies are going by monitoring student progress on a set 6 to 8 week cycle throughout the district. So another key feature of our extended learning time and additional supports for students is high impact tutoring. So high impact tutoring has been getting a lot of press recently across the country as one of the approaches that many school districts are taking to support students as they return to school post-pandemic. And one of the main reasons for this is that it is one of the most proven and effective strategies for accelerating student learning. So we will serve a range of 5 to 10% of our students with high impact tutoring. These, in order to meet the needs of the students and based on the research that shows what is most effective when it comes to tutoring, we are looking at roughly 30-minute sessions about 3 times a week with a ratio of 3 students to 1 tutor. It's important that these are consistent adult or to student relationships, so it's not necessarily a new tutor every time, but that the tutor really gets to know the students and that they're working together. We anticipate a lot of these tutors being our own educators. They are obviously skilled and talented educators, and they know our students best. We have also vetted some trusted partners who have a strong track record with providing tutoring supports to students, and so some schools may also supplement their school year acceleration academies and their high impact tutoring programs with partners. And similar to the acceleration academies, these will be progress. Students who are participating in these will be checking in on their progress every 6 to 8 weeks at a district level to ensure that we are seeing movement and that we can make tweaks as needed. So I want to shift now for a moment to just talk a little bit about technology. Obviously, in this past year, technology has been front and center to our instructional approach. And we really want to leverage what we learned and all the great benefits that technology has to offer as we return to in-person school. So even prior to COVID, many of you may be aware that we had an initiative called the Empowered Learners Initiative, which was our plan and our goal to ensure that we close the technology divide for our students and that we were able to leverage technology in the most effective ways in our classrooms. So as we return to school this coming school year, we will have a 1-to-1 device to student ratio in grades 3 through 12. And for our pre-K through 2nd grade students, we will have 1 device per 3 students. And our expectation is that there will be some technology use almost every day throughout the day, off and on. So we are not going to be, having students sitting in front of screens all day, but we will use the technology as appropriate to reinforce learning, to allow us to engage and extend the learning that the students are doing. We have lots of tools that students and teachers are now familiar with, thanks to this past school year. Canvas for our course learning management system, our Teams, which allows, even in a classroom environment, we can have a chat through Teams, using video through PlayPosit. The Smart Suite and Nearpod allow teachers to check for understanding in really engaging ways for students, and a whole set of tools through Office 365 that help our students create student work products and share their thinking with others. So we also have a number of blended programs, technology-based programs, learning programs that will enhance our acceleration strategy because they often are able to provide additional supports to students and really meet students where they are, say, with their math skills, and allow students to practice skills where they need and beef up their learning in addition to what they're getting from the teacher-based instruction in the classroom. So to support all of this, we will have ongoing professional development on our technology tools, and we are happy to say that we will be increasing our IT supports for our educators and classrooms. We really are excited about what is possible with technology. It's going to allow us to increase the technology fluency for all of our students. So really looking at that equity issue there to ensure that all students have the technology skills they need to be successful. It also allows us to provide more access for students, for instance, who are English learners, because of some of the tools like translation and captioning that can support our English learners' learning. Similarly, we can provide additional accommodations and access through technology for students with disabilities. There are many tools we can use within technology to increase reading access and growth that can support our literacy goals for the coming year. And we can also really leverage technology to make learning come alive for students. So in the photo on this slide, this is actually a picture of a virtual field trip that some of our students took to the Smithsonian this year. Obviously, because of COVID, they weren't able to go to the zoo in person. But the ways that we've used technology in this past year helped us realize that there's so many engaging and authentic ways that we can connect students to the world outside of their school and bring the world outside of their school into their classroom. And so we plan to build upon all of the great and creative and innovative uses of technology that our teachers learned this past year and integrate that seamlessly into a mix of no tech and tech use throughout the school day. So just give one glimpse of what that might look like over the course of the day. This is just a imaginary example of a day in the life in the coming school year, where there is a mix of technology and non-tech portions of the day. So you can take a look at some of the examples through as the student travels to their different courses throughout the day. They may be involved in conversations with their peers and teachers where technology is off to the side, but then they may pull out their devices in order to use a technology tool to practice a recording of a poem that they've been working on in ELA, or to record their musical composition they've been working on in music, or to even interview, in this example, an ANC commissioner in relation to what they're studying in their social studies class. So lots of opportunities to leverage devices throughout the day to keep students engaged, to meet students where they are, and provide additional supports as needed. So we know that all of the courses and academic components of the school day are critical, and we're so excited to bring students back in person for those. But we are also equally excited to relaunch our sports, our clubs, and before and after care. We know all of these activities make up students' experience in their schools and help them feel connected and excited about being a member of their school community. So we are thrilled to be able to bring back in safe ways the many sports and clubs and activities that our students participate in. So just wanted to reinforce that before and after care are back. They will be in place in our schools, as well as athletics and all of the other extracurricular programming. All right, and we have mentioned a couple of times this evening the virtual learning option. So we know that and we expect that the overwhelming majority of our students will return full-time in person, but we also know that there are a group of students, or a small number of students, who may have a documented medical need that will require them to participate in virtual learning. So for these students, we will offer high quality virtual instruction, and that we will build upon all of the work we did this year to digitize our curriculum and to leverage technology tools to ensure that students can engage in all aspects of their learning through virtual means. And this will be available for all grade levels, but in order to participate in this, students need to have the medical exemption form that the Chancellor mentioned earlier on in the evening. So I believe at this moment, we may have a moment to pause and ask and answer a few questions before we go a little deeper into our health and safety measures.
We do, thanks, Corie. Hi, everybody, I'm Shanita Burney, and I'm just gonna take give you a minute to take a breath and digest some of the information. We have a couple of more speakers and certainly some additional Q&A that we want to get to live. But want to take a moment just to pose a few questions that are coming up in the chat. Please also take a look in the chat. Folks are behind the scenes busy typing in responses as quickly as they can. I want to raise a couple of questions that folks have responded to in the chat, but for those who can't access it or maybe didn't see it, this might be repetitive, but want to pose it live. Patrick, can you talk a little bit about how many students will be able to be in each classroom and how close students will be? We know that many of the cohorting expectations that are in our guidelines are more flexible than last school year, and so folks are interested in what does that look like inside each classroom.
Great, thanks, Shanita, and yeah, thanks for the question. I think the short and easy answer is that it's tough to say right now because it's going to vary quite a bit depending on what the class looks like, but I'll just sort of talk through a few notes on that. Generally, as I mentioned, we're going to be keeping kids separated as far away as possible. But we all know it's important, we believe that it's important to bring all of our students back, and learning in person is the best place for kids to learn. And as outlined in the CDC guidance, social distancing should not be a barrier to bring back students for full in-person learning. We're able to do that because we are doing, as the Chancellor mentioned, and I highlighted a little bit, a layered approach to safety. So distancing will be one thing. But we're, because we're doing these other measures like mask wearing, access to hygiene, improving air quality, we have this layered approach that makes it more palatable that students are not necessarily 6 feet away as they were when they started or moved to 3 feet. The reality is many of our classrooms can meet 3 feet, but just we anticipate there will be some classrooms that we cannot meet 3 feet. But again, that in alignment with the CDC guidance, that is allowable, and largely in part because we are doing the layered approach to public safety, as I mentioned, with mask wearing, hygiene supplies, and improved air quality. So it's a tough thing to answer, given that there's a lot of factors, and the factors really are the room size and number of kids enrolled, but we're giving guidance to our schools to enroll the minimum number of kids in a room that's possible, given the demands on scheduling. So not a direct answer, but it's a tough one to answer just given the varying nature of room sizes and classroom sizes for enrollment. But kids will be safe. We've got lots of measures in place and lots of different layered protections.
Great, thank you. Another question, will parents be allowed in the buildings, especially as we think about drop-off and pickup of our smallest learners?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we're encouraging families to actually get in the buildings this summer. During the school year, parents will be allowed, but we do want to put a little more structure in place for that. It's obviously very important for us that we keep all of our students and staff safe, and increasing the number of people going into the building in and out makes that challenging. But we know that being out of the building has been a challenge for all of our families over the past year. So it will be loud. It'll likely be on a more scheduled basis. So if you need to come for a meeting, whether it's an IEP meeting or any other sort of meeting to support your child, that will be allowed. In terms of pickup and drop off and getting pre-K students used to their classes, we've gotten that question a lot, especially from our early childhood parents. And many of our schools, and we're encouraging our schools to do early visits for our youngest learners to make sure they can get in, get familiar with the space. You're able to walk your child in to see where they're going to be learning. So keep your eye out for more structured events over the summer and leading up to the school year. We'll have back to school nights and things like that where you get to get access, but generally it's allowed, but probably with a little more structure than a more just traditional free for all of coming to pick up your kid and taking them.
Great, thank you. Corie, a question for you. So I don't think we talked about this, but I know that a question that folks have is about aftercare. And wondering, will aftercare be starting the first day of school? Should they be expecting any differences? Can you share a little bit more information about that?
Sure. Yes, we anticipate after-school programming to begin as it would in a typical year in the first week of school. Of course, health and safety precautions will be taken during after school. So all of the same, mask wearing, social distancing as much as possible, et cetera, during after school programming will take place. But other than that, we don't anticipate major changes. We will be able to provide that programming for our families. And I would say just the only other component is because of the school year acceleration academies, there may be the first hour of after school, say in an elementary school, there may be many students participating in small group instruction or the tutoring, and then feeding into the rest of the after school programming.
Thank you. And let me squeeze in one more question, a quick question, if we could just take 30 seconds to answer. A couple of questions have been coming up in terms of the tutoring that you referenced in your presentation. Who are those folks going to be? Are they going to be trained educators? Are those folks that are just volunteers that want to help kids? Can you share just a little bit of information about that?
Sure. Yes, that's a great question, Shanita. Thank you. Our priority is to have our educators to provide tutoring as much as possible because they have the expertise, they have the knowledge of how students are performing during the school day and student needs. However, as I mentioned, we do have some trusted partners who we've worked with in the past, and these are programs who their whole design is set up to provide tutoring. And so in these models, they have staff members, or in some cases volunteers, but who have been through a rigorous training program, who are familiar with our curriculum and our approaches, and we've agreed with them as to how that tutoring should look. So we anticipate that between those trusted partners that we've worked with and our own teachers, that would make up the vast majority of tutoring in our schools. We are, taking a look at new partners that we haven't worked with before. But in any event, if we were working with partners, we would be providing training and guidance with them to make sure there's close communication between the partners and the school team, and that they're familiar with our approaches for instruction.
Thanks so much. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Bren Elliot, who's going to share a little bit more around our health precautions and measures. Dr. Elliot.
Yes, good afternoon. Are you able to hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, good. Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today. We certainly hope we are providing the right information to help you really understand and see that we are ready for your students to come back to school, and we hope that they're ready to come back to school. So I have just a couple of moments here to lean in to share some additional information around the health precautions and measures that we're taking to ensure that our students are able to return to school and remain healthy and safe. With regards to COVID screening, so if you had a student in DCPS last year that participated in our in-person learning, you probably are familiar with what we call the Ask, Look protocol. And this is a protocol in which we asked our families and students to conduct each morning prior to coming to school, where you were checking to see if you have any of the COVID-related symptoms, whether or not you had been in close proximity to anyone that had been COVID positive, or you had tested COVID positive. So we will continue that type of protocol, definitely keeping our schools safe and our student safe is a joint and shared responsibility. So it begins with our families at home doing those protocols, making sure you're doing your best to keep your students safe and COVID-free in the community. At the school each day, we will have what we call our PCTs, our patient care technicians, at our school entrances, and they will be completing or checking to ensure that these Ask, Ask, Look COVID screenings have taken place. So hopefully for the most part of our students, we'll just be verifying that families have completed this protocol at home. And then we will, our PCTs who are medically trained will be doing just a quick look observation to be sure that the student doesn't appear to be presenting with any COVID-related symptoms. In the event that a student, a staff, or a visitor fails the screening protocol, they would not be allowed to come into our buildings. For our students, if a student, maybe was not presenting with symptoms at home, on their way to school for some reason now are presenting with those symptoms when they arrive at school, we of course would be calling families to notify them that they would need to pick their student up. Mask wearing. So Patrick has already mentioned that mask wearing will be mandatory for everyone that enters our school. All of our students that are able to wear masks. Of course, there may be some students that have disabilities or other conditions that prohibit them from being able to wear a mask safely. In the event, of course, there are some exclusions but in general, all of our students, our staff, visitors will be required to be masked the entire time that they are in school, unless, of course, they are eating or drinking. And that is a protocol that we will be consistent about holding folks accountable for. We will have resources again at our school in case someone shows up and does not have a mask. And we'll also be providing training to students and others that may need some additional assistance with being able to wear their mask properly. Next, COVID testing. What are the options? So similar to last year, we will continue to do both asymptomatic testing and symptomatic testing in our schools. Last year, we used a number of vendors provided by DC Health to support our COVID testing. This year, the Office of State Superintendent of Education, OSSE, will be overseeing the COVID testing for our schools. And the current plan is that we will test each school on a weekly basis, and we will test up to 10% of the school population, and we would be pulling from unvaccinated students for that sampling. We want to encourage, first of all, every student, every staff member, every adult that has the ability to get vaccinated, but we certainly want to test everyone who is unvaccinated, and we'll be doing that random sampling on a weekly basis. If you participated in this last year, you are aware that there is a required consent in order for the testing. So in your opening of school packets, families will receive the COVID testing consent forms, and if your student is unvaccinated, we want to strongly encourage you to sign that and return it to the school once you receive it, so that we're able to include your student into that sampling. With regards to symptomatic testing, so symptomatic testing is a process by which, if we have a student or staff member during the day starts to present with COVID-like symptoms, we will have staff available to test right away at the school site. And so again, that does require a signed consent form from the family in order for that to happen. In many cases, of course, if your student starts to present with symptoms during the day, we're going to call you, contact you, and let you know that you need to pick up your student. And if there is not already a signed consent form on file, what we'll do is ask you once you arrive at the school if you would like for your student to be tested, so that you don't necessarily have to try to get into a doctor's office or another clinic. So those resources will be available for families. We want it to be very convenient for you to get that information in the event that your child is presenting with any COVID-related symptom. Next, health isolation rooms. And so each of our schools have what's called a health isolation room. It is a location in which we would keep students who start to present with any COVID-related symptom during the day. So it's a safe space that a student would be able to come to, see a medical professional, and be out of the mix of the school day until we're able to notify families for pickup, so that we do our best to reduce any possibility of spread in the event that student actually is COVID positive. So those health isolation rooms are monitored by our patient care technicians, our PCTs, and the PCTs, they will don additional PPE, personal protective equipment or gear, in order to protect themselves as well in those situations. And then finally, reporting and communicating. There's been a number of questions in the chat about that, like what happens, how does the notification happen when we have a positive case? And I will tell you that we had about 6 months of practice and had a great opportunity to really perfect our reporting protocols whenever there is a positive case in our buildings. And so when there is a case and we're notified of that, we report that in what's called the IRT, or incident reporting tool. When we do that, or a school makes that notification, what it does is alerts a number of staff and departments across central office to jump into action. One of those teams that will jump into action is our health services team. And we have a number of contact tracers that are assigned to that team. We've, in fact, more than doubled the number of contact tracers as we prepare for the upcoming year. And they immediately follow up with the school to find more detail out about the situation. So we're able to identify any students or staff that may be considered close contacts, notify them of their potential exposure to someone who is COVID positive, and begin the communication to our students and families, as well as our ops team is another team that jumps into action whenever an incident is reported, because they handle the sanitation of spaces to ensure any place that student may have gone to is clean and sanitized, so that we would reduce any possibility of spread. One piece that I really wanted to touch on with you this afternoon, of course, we're bringing students back after close to 18 months of being away from school and away from, structures. And one of the key things as a school district we are really focused on is prioritizing our students' social emotional health. And so we want to be sure that young people come back and they have a strong sense of belonging in their school, that there's a strong sense of safety. And because we know that all students at some level have experienced stress and trauma as a result of this pandemic, we want to reduce that stress, calm the brain, create the conditions that young people can get engaged in deep, meaningful learning. To do this, DCPS has launched what we call our 5 trauma responsive non-negotiables. They're here on this slide, and they include teachers greeting students daily with positive and affirming language, at launching intentional strategies in our homerooms and dedicated classrooms to build relational trust, providing space in opportunities for young people to practice emotional regulation. As adults, sometimes this, what we're dealing with is really hard, and we don't bring our best selves to our work every day. So we want to be sure that we are very empathetic to what our young people are experiencing, and we're providing them space to express their emotions in safe and healthy ways, to get their emotions under control when they feel triggered as a result of, or they feel overwhelmed. And then finally, we know it's not just been hard for our students, it has also been hard for our adults. And so DCPS has a number of strategies that are helping us to be really focused on staff wellness, the well-being of our adults in our schools. So we know we have to be sure that our caretakers are cared for. And so there are a number of things that we're doing with our schools to ensure that our adults in the building also have those skills and protective factors to help them with emotional regulation. And then this slide here just kind of gives some signs of distress, and we have kind of covered this with families and a couple of our other parent academies, and I think we have one upcoming in the next week or so that's focused on mental health. But we know that, not every single student is going to demonstrate in the same way when they're feeling overwhelmed, depressed, or sad. And so what you see here are some of the key indicators that we ask families to keep their eye on with their students, with their children, that might suggest that they need some additional support, whether talking to just their parent, getting a hug from their parent, or they may need additional resources. And if you'll go to the next slide, I think we're going to share some ways that you can get connected once you're in school. Yes, so here are ways that we can get our students connected. We launched this past year what we call our universal referral form. And it's a way that, basically anyone can refer a young person. A young person can self-refer. Their friend can refer them if they feel that they're seeing evidence that that young person is overwhelmed, depressed, sad, stressed, or need some additional support in order to be able to thrive in our schools. We have our school-based clinicians on site that are able to refer and also provide support. We're really excited about the Mayor's Mental Health expansion this year that is expanding those school-based mental health coordinators into all DCPS schools in this upcoming school year. So I think we were about at 89 of our schools having those full-time mental health coordinators. And at the end of this upcoming school year, every school, 117 of our schools, will have those full-time staff. And then finally, here are just a list of another set of resources, access to our referral forms, access to our school mental health web pages, so you'll find additional resources. We know that sometimes parents also need some resources because this has also been a very stressful time for you, so you'll find a number of those resources there as well. And now I think I am pitching it back. I'm pitching it now, I believe, to Dr. Beers.
Yeah, I'm actually going to chime in first.
Okay.
No, that's good. Thank you, Dr. Elliot.
Actually, would you like me to speak to the immunization? I apologize. I'm happy to, if you. Okay,
yeah, if you want to take.
Okay, yes. Yeah, so. Yes, absolutely. So in addition to the COVID vaccinations, one other important thing is that we want to ensure that every student has their immunization up to date. It is so critical that during this health emergency, while so many people are currently focused on COVID, that we don't forget about mumps and measles, right? Those are also other diseases that we want to be sure that we keep in check. And the way we do that is ensure that all students have updated immunization. This will be the first year in which DC public schools and schools across the entire city will be implementing the requirement that students must be vaccinated in order to attend school. There are many opportunities that our mayor has launched right now. I think there are more than 20 plus sites across the city where young people can get both their childhood immunization in addition to their COVID vaccination. So we want to encourage folks that to please put the vaccinations on the back to school list, and that includes your childhood immunizations as well as your COVID vaccines for students that are eligible. Thank you, Shanita.
Thank you again, Dr. Elliot. I want to chime in before the Chancellor comes back on. We're at time, and so I appreciate folks' patience. There was a ton of information we wanted to make sure we shared with you and wanted you to hear directly from some of these folks. And we have a couple of other questions that we have for the Chancellor and for Dr. Beers is joining us. So we will likely go about 10 minutes over. So if you have to hop off, that's fine. We're going to have a recorded version of this on YouTube, but thanks in advance if you can hang on with us. Chancellor, as you come on and talk through this slide, would love for you also to just speak to, as a DCPS parent, how are you feeling about returning, and do you feel like DCPS is ready?
Yeah, we're certainly ready. As Dr. Elliot mentioned earlier, we've had a couple of times at bat, and there's a lot that we've learned from. There's a lot for us to build on. But families should know that we've successfully been in operation since the spring and the summer, and we know what works. We have policies that have been adjusted and refined, and procedures that have been refined. And we've had more than 6 months, from November to June when school was in session, and then we've had our summertime period. So as a DCPS parent myself, definitely ready to get all of our people back in school, get my child back in school, and we will continue to follow local and federal guidelines and recommendations throughout the year. So it is an evolving situation as the CDC and DC Health has issued several iterations of guidance.
Great. And I know that we want to share, opportunities for that are on deck right now for students to get immunized. If we can go back to the previous slide, you'll see that there are opportunities. If you're not aware, there are opportunities for young people 12 and older to get vaccinated at any of our walk-up sites at Johnson Middle School, Sousa Middle School, and Brooklyn Middle School. And so you'll see on this slide opportunities for students to get some really cool incentives. And so those sites are open and available.
Yeah, and reminder to families, they're available on Tuesday through Thursday, I believe, and also on Saturday as well. AirPods, opportunity to earn an opportunity to win a $25,000 scholarship, and of course the $51 gift cards.
Awesome. I'd love to have Dr. Beers, Dr. Lee Beers, come on board. She's a DCPS parent. She's a pediatrician. She's the president of the American Academy of Pediatrics. So wears multiple hats. There are families who are concerned about the Delta variant and our current health and safety protocols, ability to effectively protect their most loved ones, their kids. And so as you think about what you've heard today and what you know about our plans, what would you share with the families on this call today around how you feel about our ability to open safely?
Well, great. Yeah, and first of all, I want to make sure you can hear me. The storm is slowing my connection a little. Good. You all are probably experiencing the same storm outside that I am. But thank you for that. And I think, as you point out, I am, in addition to being a pediatrician and the president of the AAP, I am a DCPS parent. And so I think the first thing I want to do actually is extend my thank you to the whole DCPS team. I know from just my work here and my work nationally that this has been no easy task to get our kids back to school healthy and safe. And so I really appreciate everything you're doing. And my kids are really eager to go back, and I'm really eager for them to go back. And I think when I thought about like what do I hope for, I hope that our DCPS school system, which you laid out very nicely, is following AAP and CDC guidance and collaborating closely with our health departments. I think I'll reiterate just a couple of things that others brought up, but this layered approach is so important because this helps just make sure that we have a number of layers of protection to keep our kids safe. That includes actually really importantly vaccines. My own kids, as I mentioned, I told you my kids are DCPS students. They're teenagers, and they both got their vaccines as soon as it was available to them, which to their dismay was before the iPods were available for their vaccine. But they are both vaccinated. The universal masking for our kids in schools, the other cleaning and HVAC enhancements and testing, all of those things are reflected in our AAP guidance and in CDC guidance, and really appreciate that. I think when it comes to Delta, I get asked this question quite a bit, right? And so we do know that the Delta variant is more transmissible than others, and because of that, more people are getting infected. And we also know that our children under age 12 aren't yet eligible to be vaccinated. So I think there's a couple of things that I would point out though about Delta. First and most importantly is that we know the vaccine works against it. And so that is the most important thing we can do for our families, for our communities, for our schools, if you're old enough to be vaccinated, to be vaccinated against COVID-19. And if you have questions about that, talk to your pediatrician, talk to your doctor, talk to a trusted health professional. There's a lot of misinformation out there on social media in particular, and it can be hard to wade through all of that. So I really just encourage you to talk to folks and get your questions answered. And I think by all of us who are eligible to be vaccinated, if we are getting vaccinated, that helps protect our littler ones who aren't yet eligible to be vaccinated. Where we're really seeing the greatest increases in child cases are in communities where vaccination rates are very low. And in areas where vaccination rates are really good, we're seeing less of an impact. So I think that's a really important thing. It also just, we've learned over the past year, as the Chancellor pointed out, that we can bring, we can bring kids back to in-person school very safely. And we've seen that across the country in a variety of different settings, as long as we're following good health precautions. And so it just reinforces to me the importance of adhering to those precautions, of being careful with those layered protections, with the masking and hand washing and all of those, really very basic things, but that really work well and are very effective. And then, of course, I know DCPS and DC Health have great relationship. They communicate really regularly, and that continues to be important, so that as circumstances change, if we need to make changes, we do that. So I again, just appreciate the work that all of you are doing, and really encourage everyone to, if you have not yet been vaccinated against COVID-19, to talk to your doctor and think about being vaccinated, because it's really the best way to protect our communities and our schools.
Thank you so much, Dr. Beers. In the last 2 minutes, and then we're going to close out, I actually want to go back to the Chancellor. Chancellor Ferebee, of course, the news was shared today from Mayor Bowser around vaccination mandates for DC government employees. Is there anything more you can share with families tuning in today that is helpful to know about that announcement?
Yes, thank you, Shanita. I just want to go back to what was mentioned earlier and provide some more details. So today, Mayor Bowser and I announced that the vaccination will be required for DCPS employees. The mayor announced today that the requirement will be in effect for all employees and contractors as well. This includes our teachers and school-based staff. Staff will have until Sunday, September the 19th, 2021, to provide proof of their vaccination. This will be an electronic upload for individuals that have a medical or religious reason for not getting vaccinated. They will need to produce a response electronically as well, indicating so. And then anyone who does not produce any of the following that I just mentioned will also, the previous I just mentioned, will be required to provide a weekly negative test. So again, everyone is expected, whether that's staff, school-based, central contractors, must produce vaccination documentation electronically by September 19, 2021, or produce some type of documentation that speaks to their religious or medical exemption. If any of those are not provided by September 19, 2021, the individual on staff or contractor must produce a negative test on a weekly basis. And this is something that we know is life-saving for the city, but also allows us to continue school operations, knowing that the Delta variant is becoming more rapid nationally and in the region. The COVID-19 vaccine, I want to be clear, is not required for students at this time to attend school, but it will be required for staff.
Thank you, Chancellor. Dr. Beers, I know we're over. I'm going to push one more question, trying to get them all in. Can you speak to why it makes sense to focus asymptomatic testing only on unvaccinated, since, as you reference, vaccinated and unvaccinated students and staff can transmit COVID? Uh-oh, we might, she might be frozen. Okay, we'll we might have a connection issue. I know that the storm is really going. We'll try to put that in our FAQs moving forward, and make sure we get that response out to folks. Thank you all for hanging in tough with us. Going 12 minutes over, I'm going to kick it over to Natalie Tregle to close us out. Thank you.
Thanks, Shanita. I know that it is getting close to bath time, bedtime, dinner time. I know, at least in my house. So for those folks that want to go back and watch this later or share with others in your community, there will be a recording available. I just added the link to that recording in the chat, so give us about a day and we'll get this up on YouTube. A few other small housekeeping notes. We have a survey that we'd love for you to fill out about how engagement, how you'd like to be engaged by DCPS in the coming year. We'll also add that link to the chat, as well as a few other reminders here about enrollment and an email address if you want to follow up, which is parentu@k12.dc.gov. And then finally, we have 2 more parent university sessions in our Recover Strong strand. So next week we'll have supporting our students accelerating learning in and out of the classroom. So if you want to dig a little bit deeper into what Corie shared about academics and also just how we're supporting students to have a fun and joyful learning experience, please join us on the 17th. And then on the 19th, we'll be digging into mental health supports. That was a question that came up a few times in the chat. So if you want to go deeper there, please register for the session on August 19th. And we'll drop the link to register to those in the chat as well. Finally, just want to echo what Shanita said, what the Chancellor shared. We really appreciate you joining us this evening for all of the great questions. We're doing our best to respond to all of those that come in. And we will be